With the world finally waking up to a lot of the racial injustices for the past hundreds of years in our country, really sparked by the murder of George Floyd, I thought about you a little bit when I was researching because I went to University of Arizona for a year.
Hmm.
I went to Tucson, Arizona, then transferred to USC.
Okay. Why in the world did you do
I'm listen.
that?
I'm from LA. You couldn't keep me there.
Okay, okay, I got you.
I'll tell you, other than Bison Witches, that sandwich restaurant, which I still think about once a week, I don't miss a ton there because I'll be honest with you, I did hear a lot of racism in Tucson, Arizona, and I wanted to know what your experience was like growing up there and playing there, especially because you played in Texas, which isn't necessarily known for its unity.
Well, yeah, there was a lot of racism in Tucson. There was. I mean, that's the reality of it. There's racism everywhere, but there was racism in Tucson. And, I got called names plenty of times or got looks. And, my mother grew up in Mississippi, Holly Springs, Mississippi. And so, I'd come home and tell her, hey, mom, this happened today or this happened. And she'd say, well, that's racist. And you don't have to stand for that. But I would, I was still young and naive and say, oh, mom, come on, not all that can be racist. And then as I got older, lo and behold, my mom got a lot smarter in my eyes. So yeah, I mean, there was just definitely that. There's no way to avoid it. And Tucson is a lot more liberal than probably any other towns in Arizona. So, but while I still love Tucson, I wouldn't trade my experience growing up there for anything.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, definitely had episodes and times that were tough. It's hard to imagine. And a lot of people, when I tell them this, they go, no way. But literally in elementary school, I fought almost every day.
Wow.
Almost every single day. I got in some kind of scuffle or fight almost every day.
And what percentage of that school was white?
It was all white. I mean, all white and Hispanic, I think, coming up all the way until the sixth grade when I moved and I went to a school that had a lot more black students. I mean, up until that time, I mean, I was like, I'd be one of the only two black kids in school, two or three black kids in school. And so, it's like, the one story that I tell is when Roots came out, the teacher was talking about it in class. And like every time she would say something about the slaves, everybody's turning around looking at me like I'm some kind of authority.
Wow.
And then when the one instance that really got me in a lot of trouble was when I got off the bus one day and I had about 20 or 30 kids waiting for me when I got off the bus and they were chanting Roots.
Oh my God.
And so I just got off the bus just ready to swing. I was just already, it was already tense because, I was watching the miniseries too. So this is what you did. It was only 3 television channels, not like you had, 500 channels to watch. So everybody sat down at night and watched Roots. And so I watched it and, I'd get the Kunta Kintes and the Toby or, people call you Chicken George, thinking it's funny. And so it wasn't the best time for, maybe it was the best time for a young black kid.
Yeah, that is brutal. It's weird because you think a school like University of Arizona is liberal arts to an extent, and I remember so vividly going there and being shocked. I guess maybe because it's such a feeder school for Scottsdale, which is like Snowtown. It's so white, but like the thing about black kids that were at U of A, it was mostly athletes, and I went there in 97, 98. I mean, it didn't feel like a very diverse campus at all.
Well, most of the black kids that I went to school with at Arizona were athletes, maybe all of them. I had a funny instance. All of us were in freshman English. So my recruiting class, 6 guys, 5 were black. The one white guy that was on our team was from Iowa. And the 5 of us, the 5 black freshmen, we all tested into English 100, I believe it was. And so all of us were taking the same class at the same time. And we had a black professor,
right?
And we were discussing a book about a black musician. And a white girl raised her hand. We were finished discussing this book, and the white girl raised her hand. And in class, she said, if black people's bottom of their feet are white and their hands white, or their hands are white, are their butts white too?
Sean.
And yes, the class erupted. Bruce Wheatley was laying on the floor laughing. The teacher was chuckling. He didn't know what to say. some of the other students were like, "I mean, my goodness, haven't you ever seen like National Geographic?"
Right.
I mean, it was a time where, it was so funny. It wasn't offensive. It was just like, my goodness, like people really don't know. They don't know about Black people.
Sean, I'll tell you this one, and I don't mean to dog U of A because honestly, the education there was much better than you would think based on the things you're hearing right now. I actually learned a lot of stuff that was, I think I learned about HD television there for the first time in like '96.
Yeah.
But I will say, I have a friend, Adam Pally, great comedian. He showed up on this podcast once recently, and he has a story. We went there at the same time, and he has a story where he went on a date with a girl, and she asked, and he thought she was kidding. She asked where his horns were because he was Jewish, and he thought she was joking, so they laughed, and then she wasn't laughing, and she had been taught by her parents that Jewish people have horns.
Yeah, I've heard a similar story like that from one of our media relations people in Detroit. The same thing, where one of her Black girlfriends went out actually with a white girl, and the white girl picked her up and said, "Hey, that's this cute dress. Where do you hide your tail?"
Unbelievable.
So, I mean, but it that kind of thing, when I hear that, I don't get offended because I've heard so many. I mean, we could sit here for an hour.
Yeah.
And I could tell you this kind of story, and some people will think that, that can't possibly happen. It happened.
Yeah, it happened. And I guess, to sum it up and not make people so sad about what we're hearing, the good news is in 2020, we have a great awakening that's going on. You see it with the NBA, with the social issues, like you said, they're facing so elegantly. And I'm happy to see where we're at this year, at least.
I'm happy that the conversation's still going on.
Yeah.
I'll be honest with you, Jensen. I mean, I've become really cynical, and I'm wondering if a year from now, if we're just going to be in the same situation.
I hope not, Sean.
Or everybody forgets about it, and it's going to take something else, and everybody's going to start writing again. Are we, really set up to make a change? A big part of me feels like we are, because the younger generation, they're woke, if you will.
Yep.
And they have friends that are different colors, different sexual orientation, and they're open about it. Mm-hmm. Whereas, our generation wasn't. I was with a group of friends the other day. We were talking about the same thing, and I said, "Hey, how many of you guys went to school with a gay guy?" And they were like, well, it was obviously an older group of people, and they're like, "Well, we didn't know they were gay because they weren't open." I would say, exactly.
Yeah.
We went to school with all kinds of people that had to hide who they were, hide their true self from us, because we were, so backward and intolerant back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And now this new generation, they're not like that. My daughter and my kids, all our kids are now out of college, but when they were in high school, even a few years back, they had friends that they knew were gay,
yeah,
or lesbian. And so, the whole way that they think and the way they're brought up now is different. They're way more tolerant of each other than our generation and our previous generations were. And so that kind of gives me hope that the younger generation is going to, topple this thing and put us over the edge and really, really change hearts and change minds.